Golden horizons, the afternoon sun streamed through the windows of Horizon Magazine's bustling office as Olivia Reed stared at her computer screen in disbelief. The email that had just arrived couldn't possibly be real. "You've got to be kidding me," she whispered, drawing curious glances from nearby colleagues. Her editor, Patricia Wong, appeared beside her desk with a knowing smile. "I take it you saw the response from Archer Industries?" Olivia nodded, still processing. "Dominic Archer never gives interviews. I've sent his team requests for 3 years straight." "Well, something about your proposal must have caught his attention," Patricia said, clearly pleased. "His team specifically requested you. Don't waste this opportunity." At 32, Olivia had built a reputation for thoughtful profiles that captured the essence of her subjects, rather than chasing sensationalism. Still, landing an exclusive with Dominic Archer, the 30-8-year-old tech visionary, whose quantum computing breakthroughs had revolutionized everything from climate modeling to medical research, felt surreal. 2 weeks later, Olivia stood in the soaring glass atrium of Archer Industries' Seattle headquarters, clutching her notebook like a lifeline. The building itself seemed alive, with walls of living plants, natural light, and an architectural flow that made traditional corporate offices feel like relics. "Miss Reed?" A voice interrupted her thoughts. "Mr. Archer will see you now." She followed the assistant through a series of corridors, mentally rehearsing her questions, until they reached a surprisingly modest office with panoramic views of Puget Sound. The man who rose to greet her defied her expectations. Media photos portrayed Dominic Archer as intimidatingly polished, but in person, his eyes crinkled warmly when he smiled, and his slightly rumpled button-down suggested he'd been working intensely before her arrival. "Miss Reed, welcome." "I've followed your work for some time," he said, his British accent softer than in his TED Talks. "Your piece on ethical limitations in biotechnology was particularly insightful." Olivia blinked, caught off guard. "You read that?" "I make it a point to understand the journalists I invite into my space," he replied, gesturing toward comfortable chairs overlooking the water. "Coffee? Tea?" The interview began professionally enough, with Olivia asking about Archer's new initiative to bring quantum computing resources to developing nations. But what was scheduled for 90 minutes stretched to 3 hours as their conversation meandered from technology. Ethics to favorite bookstores to childhood? Dreams. I wanted to build a time machine when I was 9. Dominic admitted, laughing. "I was devastated when my father explained the physics problems." "I wanted to talk to animals," Olivia countered. "Specifically, I had questions for my neighbor's extremely judgmental cat." By the time Olivia checked her watch, the sky had turned dusky pink. "I should let you get back to changing the world," she said, gathering her notes. "Actually," Dominic said, a hint of hesitation in his voice, "there's a small exhibition at the Art Museum Photography from climate-affected regions. The proceeds support our relief fund. Would you consider joining me?" "For the article, of course." His transparency was disarming. "For the article," Olivia agreed, ignoring the flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with professional interest. The museum date led to dinner, which led to conversations that stretched until midnight. When Dominic's driver dropped her home, she realized with alarm that she'd spent the entire evening forgetting to take mental notes for her piece. Over the following weeks, Olivia found herself in Dominic's orbit repeatedly at a technology panel where they debated ethics afterward over coffee, at a charity auction where he outbid everyone for a painting she'd admired, and finally, at a quiet dinner where he admitted he'd been finding increasingly transparent excuses to see her. "This is problematic," Olivia said, even as her fingers intertwined with his across the table. "I'm supposed to be writing objectively about you." "Then write about someone else," he suggested simply. "I'm far less interesting than my work anyway." But that wasn't true, Olivia thought as spring turned to summer and professional distance gave way to deepening connection. Dominic Archer, brilliant, thoughtful, and unexpectedly vulnerable, was the most fascinating person she'd ever met. She couldn't possibly have known then that beneath his Genuine warmth lay secrets that would eventually force her to choose between her heart and her truth. Asterisk velvet whispers autumn painted Seattle in shades of amber and crimson as Olivia settled into a new rhythm. Her relationship with Dominic had evolved from cautious professional interest to something that made her heart race when her phone chimed with his messages. She'd handed off the Archer Industries profile to a colleague, eliminating the ethical conflict. Though Patricia hadn't hidden her disappointment. "You're giving up the interview of the decade for a relationship?" her editor had asked, eyebrows raised. "I'm maintaining my journalistic integrity," Olivia had countered, though she sometimes wondered if she'd made the right choice tonight. Dominic had surprised her with tickets to the symphony, followed by dinner at a restaurant so exclusive it didn't have a sign. As they sipped wine beneath crystal chandeliers, Olivia studied the man across from her, the subtle crease between his brows when he concentrated, the way his eyes lit up when discussing his humanitarian projects. "What?" Dominic asked, catching her stare. "Just wondering how I ended up here," she admitted. 6 months ago, you were just a name on my interview list." He reached for her hand. "And now?" "Now, you're the reason I'm neglecting my expose on the water rights controversy," she teased. Dominic's smile faltered slightly. "Speaking of your work, have you considered my offer? The foundation could use someone with your investigative skills for our global initiatives." The job offer had come last week, a position created seemingly for her at the Archer Foundation, with double her current salary and opportunities to travel internationally. "I'm still thinking about it," she said carefully. "I've been independent my entire career, Dominic. Working for you would change that." "Not for me," he corrected. "With me. There's a difference." Later that night, in Dominic's penthouse overlooking the city, Olivia woke to find his side of the bed empty. Wrapping herself in his discarded shirt, she padded through the minimalist space until she heard his voice from the home office. "It's handled." "Nathan," Dominic was saying, his tone sharper than she'd ever heard. "The Meridian files won't be an issue." Olivia froze, her journalistic instincts suddenly alert. "Because I've taken care of it," he continued. "Like I took care of the situation with Elliot 5 years ago. Just keep the board focused on the new platform launch." She retreated silently to bed before he could discover her, but sleep eluded her. Who was Elliot? What were the Meridian files? The conversation replayed in her mind, along with the realization that for all their intimacy, there were parts of Dominic's life he kept carefully shadowed. The next morning, she kissed him goodbye with a forced lightness, claiming a deadline. Instead of returning to her apartment, she went straight to Horizon Magazine's archives. "I need everything we have on Archer Industries," she told the archivist, "especially from 5 to 7 years ago, before the quantum computing breakthrough." Hours later, surrounded by files, Olivia began piecing together a story that diverged from Dominic's carefully cultivated narrative. Before Archer Industries became a tech giant, it had been a struggling startup called Meridian Technologies, co-founded by Dominic and someone named Elliot Vance. A small article from 6 years ago mentioned Elliot's departure to pursue other opportunities, but provided no details. Meridian had been on the verge of bankruptcy before suddenly securing massive investment funds and rebranding as Archer Industries. Olivia's search expanded to court databases, where she discovered sealed records involving Meridian Technologies. Without legal access to those documents, she reached out to former Meridian employees, most of whom declined to comment. Finally, a breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Raquel Jimenez, a former administrative assistant at Meridian, agreed to meet at a quiet cafe across town. "I don't know what happened exactly," Raquel said, nervously shredding a napkin. But Elliot changed almost overnight. He went from excited about their prototype to anxious, constantly checking over his shoulder. Then one day, he didn't come in. His office was cleared out, and Mr. Archer announced he'd left the company. "Did anyone hear from Elliot after that?" Olivia asked. Raquel hesitated. "There were rumors he took a payout to disappear. Some people said the prototype had a critical flaw that could have killed the company, and Elliot wanted to go public while Dominic wanted to fix it quietly." The conversation left Olivia with more questions than answers. Back home, she created a timeline on her living room wall, connecting documents with red string like a detective in a crime drama. The more she investigated, the more she found concerning gaps in Dominic's rise to power when he called that evening. His voice warm with affection, guilt crawled up her spine. "You disappeared today," he said. "Everything okay?" "Just work," she lied, staring at the web of questions on her wall. "Research rabbit holes? Anyone I know?" he asked lightly. "No one important," she answered, the deception bitter on her tongue. 2 days later, a plain envelope arrived at her apartment containing a single USB drive. No note, no return address. Heart-pounding, Olivia plugged it into her computer to find a single audio file, a recorded conversation between Dominic and Elliot Vance from 6 years ago, discussing what appeared to be falsified test results and altered safety data. "We can't release this, Elliot," Dominic's voice insisted. "The investors would pull out immediately." "We can't lie about it either," Elliot countered. "People could get hurt." "No one will get hurt if we fix it first," Dominic argued. "We need 3 months. If you go public now, everything we've built dies here." The recording ended abruptly, leaving Olivia staring at her screen in shock. This wasn't just a story anymore. It was her relationship, her future, possibly even her safety if the USB's mysterious appearance was any indication. That night, when Dominic surprised her with an impromptu visit and a bouquet of wildflowers, she forced herself to smile while her mind raced with questions. As he kissed her hello, she couldn't help wondering if his lips had formed the same lies she'd heard on the recording. "What's wrong?" he asked, always perceptive. "You seem distant?" Olivia took a deep breath, mentally crossing a threshold she knew they could never return from. "Dominic," she said quietly, "we need to talk about Elliot Vance and what really happened at Meridian Technologies." His face transformed before her eyes, warmth draining away as the mask of the man she thought she knew began to slip. The color drained from Dominic's face, his expression hardening into something unrecognizable. For a moment, the only sound in her apartment was the ticking of the vintage clock on her bookshelf. "Where did you hear that name?" he asked, his voice unnervingly calm. Olivia gestured toward her investigation board. "I'm a journalist, Dominic. Did you think I wouldn't eventually look into your past?" He moved to the board, studying her meticulous work with clinical detachment. "I see you've been busy. Is this what all those deadline excuses were about?" "Don't deflect," she said, anger rising. "What happened with Elliot Vance? And don't tell me he left to pursue other opportunities." Dominic's shoulders slumped slightly. "I suppose it was inevitable," he murmured, more to himself than to her. After a long moment, he turned. "What exactly do you think you know?" "I know Meridian was failing before Elliot disappeared. I know your quantum breakthrough came suspiciously soon after, and I have a recording of you discussing falsified safety data with him." His eyes widened. "A recording? From whom?" "That's not the point," Olivia pressed. "Is it true? Did you build your empire on fraud?" Shattered glass. The confrontation stretched through the night, with Dominic finally revealing the truth in halting fragments. Meridian's prototype had indeed shown dangerous flaws, but instead of disclosing them, Dominic had pressured Elliot to remain silent while they worked on solutions. "Elliot threatened to go public," he explained, pacing her small living room. "He was right, technically, but it would have destroyed us. I convinced him to give me 3 months. And then what?" Olivia demanded. "He just vanished." Dominic's laugh was hollow. "Is that what you think? That I had him eliminated?" He pulled out his phone, scrolling through contacts before turning the screen toward her. "Elliot Vance, I can call him right now." Confusion washed over Olivia. "Then why the secrecy? The sealed court documents?" "Because we broke laws," Dominic admitted bluntly. "We falsified progress reports to investors while we fixed the problems. When Elliot threatened to become a whistleblower, I paid him off handsomely to keep quiet. The settlement came with ironclad NDAs and sealed records." Olivia sank onto her couch, processing. "So your entire empire is built on a lie." My empire is built on technology that has saved countless lives and advanced human knowledge, he countered, a flash of anger breaking through. Yes, I made a moral compromise at the beginning. But the alternative was letting revolutionary technology die because we needed more development time than investors would allow. The man before her was simultaneously the Dominic she'd fallen for and a stranger with edges she'd never glimpsed. Why didn't you tell me? She asked quietly, his expression softened. Because I wanted to be the man you thought I was. Asterisk Truth's price. The article took Olivia 3 weeks to write, the most agonizing of her career. She interviewed Elliot Vance, who had reluctantly agreed to break his NDA, and combed through documents provided by anonymous sources within Archer Industries. When Dominic received the courtesy copy of her expose, the night before publication, his only response was a text, "I understand." The quantum deception hit the digital front page of Horizon magazine on a rainy Tuesday morning. By afternoon, Archer Industries stock had plummeted 43%. By evening, the board had called an emergency meeting. By the following morning, federal investigators had opened a probe into securities fraud. Olivia watched the fallout from her apartment, declining all interview requests. She'd done her job with unflinching accuracy, but victory felt hollow. 3 months passed. Dominic stepped down as CEO but avoided criminal charges by cooperating fully with investigators and establishing a restitution fund for early investors. The technology itself remained valid and valuable, saving Archer Industries from complete collapse. Olivia's article won a prestigious journalism award, which she accepted with a speech about integrity that felt hypocritical even as she delivered it. That night, she stared at her reflection in her bathroom mirror and wondered why success felt so much like loss. Asterisk silver linings. 4 years later, Olivia found herself in Geneva covering a global tech ethics summit. She'd left Horizon for a position with an international news agency. Building a reputation as an authority on the intersection of technology and ethics, she spotted him across the conference, whole Dominic Archer, now running a modest research foundation focused on ethical applications of quantum computing. He looked different, slightly grayer at the temples, dressed more simply, but with a centeredness she didn't remember from before. Their eyes met across the crowded room. After a moment's hesitation, he nodded in acknowledgement. Later they found themselves alone in the venue's garden. "Your panel was excellent," he offered, "especially the points about transparency frameworks." "Thank you," she replied, surprised by the absence of bitterness in his tone. "Your foundation's work on climate modeling is impressive." An awkward silence stretched between them until Dominic spoke again. "I wanted to hate you," he admitted. "For a while I did, but eventually I realized something." "What's that?" "That you freed me," he said simply. "Living with that secret was ... corrosive. Losing everything forced me to rebuild based on what actually matters." Olivia studied him, seeing truth in his words. "And what matters?" "Doing good work honestly," he replied. "Finding purpose beyond wealth or power." He paused. "I never thanked you." She laughed softly, incredulous. "For destroying your company?" "For forcing me to face myself." His smile was genuine, though perhaps a conversation would have been less catastrophic than a front-page expose. As the sunset painted the Alps in golden light, they walked through the garden, 2 different people than they had been in Seattle, both shaped by the consequences of truth, both finding unexpected paths forward. They didn't speak of reconciliation or second chances. Some bridges, once burned, aren't meant to be rebuilt. But as they parted with a handshake that lingered just a moment too long, both recognized something valuable in their shared history, a reminder that sometimes the greatest act of love is holding someone accountable to their better self. Olivia watched him walk away, realizing that while their story didn't have the ending she once imagined, it had the ending it needed, one where truth, however painful, ultimately set them both free.